Here we are in the shop today, and I got my switch installed. And so basically what this does is when I'm in the open position, and I'm in the center position here, center being both pickups are active. Before, in the straight wire position, so with the switch closed, that's straight wire, what happens is when you turn the neck pickup volume up, but you turn the bridge volume down, it being in parallel hardwired will affect the volume of the front pickup and vice versa. You have the back pickup up and you turn the front one down, then it pulls down the volume of the back pickup. Well, I didn't like that, and so what I did is I put a little switch in the shorting position on this switch, and I broke that short, and I brought the two leads over here where I could make it a short by closing this switch as it is now, straight wire in other words. Or if I open this switch, then there would no longer be a straight wire connection, and by adding a capacitor I can couple the AC component of the sound, the signal, through the capacitor, and this will block or effectively look like an open to a like a hard wire or a direct current. And wouldn't you know it, as luck would have it, look what I'd saved all these years. A little 033 spray of Black Beauty. I think that's the one the guitar players want. So I had a couple of these on the shelf from years ago. And so now, with the switch open and using the capacitor, what happens is you can turn up the bridge, and we can turn the bridge down and the neck up, and we don't have any cutoff there. When you get to zero here, what you have is you have some impedance changing going on, and that affects the tone. So we're not draining anything to ground as you would be doing with a traditional tone control, where you have a capacitor going to ground and you're actually bleeding off some of your higher frequencies and more and more at a higher and higher level, depending on where your tone pot would be setting. Well, we're not doing that here. What you do when you do that with a tone control and a capacitor to ground is you're actually losing that part of the signal. you're decreasing your overall output because you're draining some of it to ground, the highs. Well, we're not draining anything to ground here. We're mixing it, and as this resistance is changing, you have some interaction here because you have two inductors, and now you have a capacitor in series. So you're changing the AC impedance somewhat, and that's causing I guess a coloring of the sound, I guess would be a good way to describe that. And another thing that's going on is with the lead and the lag of the voltage and the current, in a inductive capacitive circuit, you have a little bit of phase adding and phase canceling, which further will color the sound. And the nice thing about getting a tone this way is you're not throwing any of the signal away. You're using the whole signal, so you're not draining some of it to ground. You're not losing any of it. You're using all the signal. And when you hit a string, you have all that punch and all that power that you would have with just a normal pure tone. That's the difference, because you haven't thrown any of your signal away, such as you would be doing draining it to ground through a tone control capacitor. And I think that's kind of neat. To go a step further, what I did was I put reversing switches on both of the pickups so I could reverse the phase on either or both. And I had my friend T.K. Smith wire this pickup here that he wound for me as a 3-wire pickup. So the coil leads are isolated, and the ground braid is just that. It's a ground, the shield to ground out through the cord and over to the amp. And so that's easily reversible. Now this P90 here, I took it apart and I made it a 3-wire. In other words, a double-ended connection instead of a single-ended connection. And because it was not potted in the same way that TK wax pots his, this is more accessible when you take it apart to reconfigure your leads from the coil. So I did this one myself, and he made this one for me as a 3-wire. So I could do this, switch polarity. So what you have now, if you pull one up and leave one down in the center position, isolated through the capacitor, you can affect the tone and the balance overall through the phase shifting. And you can get some interesting tones not only on the low end but also on the high end by doing that. This all goes back several years ago. I read something in a book that Chet had written about his D'Angelico wiring when he first did it. And then later on, when Ray Butts came on the scene, I guess in '54, somewhere thereabouts, Ray, being the smart fella that he was, said to Chet, "Did you know your pickups are out of phase?" And so that was the whole premise of all of this experimentation over the past year or two, was to try to duplicate or recreate some of the conditions that Chet may have had in his early days with his D'Angelico homebrew conversion, and see if we could find a little bit of that vintage sound he had. It's all about the sound. And so I hope maybe this has helped somebody to understand a little bit more and maybe want to try a project of your own and see what you can come up with.